All right. I'm sure the first question you guys will ask will be about Bobby Brown. We're waiting on his MRI. The X-rays did come back good. There was nothing on the X-rays, but sometimes with those ankles, it's his ankle that did get rolled up on. And I know from previous experience myself when I played that sometimes even if you don't have an actual fracture, depending upon the significance of some of the what you do with the sprain, how it shows up with the ligaments and tendons can almost be just as bad. But we're hoping for the best, but I'm still waiting on those MRI results from Reggie. I spoke with him this morning and we still haven't gotten that back yet.
Stu.
Thanks for that update, Sean. That actually takes care of my first question.
Okay.
So besides that, are there any guys that after, seeing them play last night and kind of getting the chance to evaluate them, that you may dial back their workload for the sake of, them having a projected role like you've talked about before?
Yeah, it's a good question, Stu. I think you start to get into a number situation because by Tuesday, we've actually got to get our roster down to 85, and we already hold so many guys out as it is. So it'll probably continue to operate with the same, guys that you saw last night. We'll continue to monitor their snaps. But knowing that we've got two more of these things, you want to be able to get those guys that work. And, sometimes it's a matter of, like you guys asked about Tutu last night, it's a credit to what he's done, but it's also in response to, having a guy that you don't know what Van Jefferson's availability will be. There's still a chance like we've talked about for week one, but knowing some of the things that we want to be able to do. And obviously Cooper and Allen are going to be huge parts of the way that we operate offensively, but figuring out what it looks like if Van isn't available will be a combination of guys with the Tutus, with the Ben Skoranek. Brandon Powell's a guy that has shown that he's worth getting involved as well. And so all of those things are fluid situations. But I think as it relates to especially those rookies that we are counting on, I think them getting that work is still necessary. And you want to be smart, but you can't be, too overcautious because we still have to be able to go out there and field 11 on special teams on offense and defense.
Thank you.
You're welcome, buddy.
Jordan.
Hey, Sean. I have two quarterback questions, if you don't mind.
Sure.
With Bryce Perkins, it's interesting to watch him practice, right? Because he's running certain reps with certain facets of the scout team and then in camp with some of the third team and second team. But then when he goes into the game, it seems very clear that you guys as coaches encourage him to do the things that he does best and work out of structure. So how do you balance that between installing what you need to install and encouraging him to take on all of that information, then also not losing the parts of his game that you encourage him to do on game day?
Yeah, it's funny. I was thinking about very similar things this morning, because I think some of the most difficult evaluations, Jordan, are running backs, with the way that you practice until you get into real games. And really because of the athleticism that Bryce provides, a lot of plays in camp that, if we had those plays in camp yesterday, you'd be saying, hey, that's a sack. And he ends up breaking 2 tackles and creates for a first down. So I think in practice settings, you always want to play within the, the rhythm, the timing of the play, but then still, hey, if there's an opening, use your athleticism like you would, but you can never really mimic and emulate, the tackling of it. Now, certainly we could say we're going to tackle guys, but, you're always going back and forth risk reward. So I think it's just continuing to coach, but also having awareness that the beauty of this game that I definitely have come to appreciate more and more as you get experience is that there's 22 moving parts on every single snap. And sometimes the things that go off schedule are really where the special players illustrate why they're special. I think about that from an offensive perspective, but even, some of the guys defensively that have the ability to wreck a game, they can overcome a lot of different things. Or, there's been times when Aaron makes a smart play, but he might get outside the gap integrity, but he knew, hey, I could go backside B and not lose the front side A gap and still be able to make the play on the back. So it's a give and take, but I think you want to try to simulate those game-like settings as much as possible while also understanding that when you play tackle, it's a totally different deal. And it's the same thing with our guys on defense, not just tagging off, but how do you really put yourself in a position where, all right, if I'm really going to make this play, am I in the proper leverage with my base balance, my body position to be able to get a guy to the ground? And, watching Bryce do that last night, you start thinking as a coach, how can I make sure that I'm getting that communicated clearly so that our practice situations will reflect that game reality while being as smart and safe as possible. It was probably more than what you were looking for, but it relates to a lot of different things, not exclusively just Bryce, because of his ability to create off schedule. And, the running backs has always been a position that's a little bit more challenging to evaluate because playing tackle football is what we do, and we don't do it in practice for, really ever.
Yeah, first of all, that did very thoroughly answer my question. So I appreciate the detail there. But then also with you guys keeping 3 last year, what did you learn about walking that line through the regular season? Not just keeping 3 on the active, but also making sure that you're effectively not just running your scout with John, but also getting Bryce, not just the development in your system, but also doing the things that he can do.
Yeah, I think, really those guys both provide a lot of value, and, we feel like they have very good comfort level with the way that we operate, but especially with some of the looks. I mean, you look at what a big part of the league mobility is for a lot of the teams that we're playing, particularly when you look at 2 of our division opponents, and Kyler and with Trey Lance, but John has the athleticism as well, but both of those guys provide tremendous value, and it is something that, can really help us as it relates to carrying 3 guys. I don't ever really want to pigeonhole ourselves into, hey, this is the amount of quarterbacks that we keep. It's a lot of times, fluid and flexibility based on, are there other guys that have earned that right? And then there's a nuanced feel to, all right, is this somebody that maybe we could elevate from the practice squad? So there's a lot of things that you take into account, but quarterback is a position that, because of the amount of information that these guys are responsible for digesting and how many, years have been accrued with really all of those guys that we're talking about, that is something that we do value. But Bryce is, and he's a really great guy to be around too. So he did a great job last night. I was really happy for him.
Thank you, Sean.
You're welcome.
Gilbert.
Hey, Sean, I have 2 questions, but I'll start with Cameron Dicker. He did a little bit of everything yesterday. What did you see from Cameron?
He did awesome. So here's my first question for you. Do you want to be called Gilbert or Gilberto? Because I know I've seen people call you that before, but what do you prefer?
Well, my full name is Gilberto. You pronounce it well. Just roll your R, and we're cool with Gilberto.
Gilberto. Okay, I like it. G it is. All right.
I like it. I appreciate it, Sean.
But I think it provides tremendous value. You look at what he did. He's done a great job. Now, when you really look at it, Matt's a really established player, as is Riley. You never know how important those positions can really be, and you never make predetermined decisions before you have to. But I think most importantly, you see the value that he can provide, not only for us, but really for a team. The more that you can do, especially at a high level, being able to kick off, being able to punt, being able to, be a really good field goal kicker, those are things that provide tremendous value. He's done a great job seamlessly fitting in, and was really pleased with him. And I think Joe D and Jeremy Springer have done an excellent job, and as well as kind of Matt and Riley and Orzic kind of putting their arms around him and making him feel a part of that group.
And Sean, going with the running backs from yesterday, Jake Funk, AJ Rose, and Ray, those 3 guys, what did you see from them in that game yesterday?
Yeah, I thought, Jake did a nice job. Jake's a guy that's, going into his 2nd year. He's a mature rookie. He was a mature rookie last year. Liked the way that he leveled some runs off, had a good feel in the screen game. And then I was really pleased with AJ. Ray coming back from the injury that he sustained last year in the preseason. What a credit to Ray to be able to be available, make a lot of plays. He ran, some good tough runs and leveled things off against a physical defense. And then I was really pleased with AJ Rose. Hadn't been around him other than, at the start of this camp, but you could see a guy that, had success in the SEC, did a good job in some of those tight red area runs, being able to finish where, guys are unblocked and he's being able to create on his own. And so I was pleased with that. And then it was also good to get Regis a couple carries at the end as well.
Thank you, Sean.
You're welcome.
Gary.
Hey, Sean.
Hey, Gary.
Nice new backdrop there for your.
Thank you.
Hey, speaking of running backs, will Kyron Williams play against the Texans, or as we go on in the preseason?
I'm not sure about that. He's done a really good job, Gary. He's basically been a full participant with the way that we practice as of late. I think a lot of that's going to be predicated on, some of the health of the other situations. But I have not determined that yet. You'd like to see him in an ideal situation, but kind of similar to Tutu, some of those things are, flexible situations, but this is a guy that I loved coming out of Notre Dame. We loved as a coaching staff. You know, I know Les and his group felt the same way. Hated that he got the foot injury that set him back, but this guy is locked in. If you just watch the way that he's mentally engaged and then being able to take some of the physical reps for the first time, it's a quick study. I think the things that Tommy Rees was asking him to do at Notre Dame are very easy evaluations. And so it's been a good transition. And I think this guy's going to be a really good player for us, whether he plays in the next 2 preseason games. Not 100% sure, but he's going to have really heavy workloads at practice. And I expect him to be a guy that's going to help us this year.
And then is there a maximum number of receivers you would carry? The reason I ask that is with McCutcheon's performance last night, and it's only one preseason game, but he looks like a guy that could help you. And you have some depth at receiver, at least some guys on the roster that have some experience, or at least from last year's draft class. So how many receivers are you willing to carry? And does McCutcheon have a realistic chance of making the roster?
I think certainly, you know, and I would say this, a lot of that, Gary, is predicated on, you know, you look at the 53, but I really am interested in the 48. You know, how do these guys get up on game day? And that's a big part of it, you know, to be able to help Joe D and Jeremy Springer, especially if you're not, when you send your starting 11 out, whether it's in 12 personnel, 11 personnel, if you're not on the field, for you to have a jersey and dress with the 48, you better be willing to help on special teams. And so that all weighs into it. You know, if you said anywhere between 6 and 8, but, you know, ideally you're really saying you've got 5 guys up, but then, you know, sometimes we used to carry 6 because Mike Thomas was such a unique contributor on special teams. So there's a lot of layers to it, Gary, no different than, you know, some of those, whether it's inside backers, even safeties, some of those bigger body types that can provide good matchups in space on some of the coverage units or protection units where you're transitioning to coverage. So I would say, yes, he's a very realistic candidate to make this roster. But in a lot of instances, you think about not necessarily the 53, but the 48, knowing that that's a moving target as well with injuries. But I would say, you know, between 6 and 8 you're talking about, but it is, it's not a finite deal. And every year would kind of provide a different answer based on, all right, who's helping Joe D and what are those body types like outside of the, you know, clear cut starters that you guys kind of know who those are.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
All right. We good, guys?
Okay. Thank you guys.